Stephen Downs, we meet again.
Hello. It's been a while.
Yeah, yeah. Perhaps too
Wow,
long.
been a while to record. I don't know.
Maybe the timing has been perfect.
I don't know.
Well, what
That's useful.
yeah, thanks. Thanks for carrying the conversation along.
Yeah. So I did a lot of improv when I was younger.
I was
Um,
told yes and are the two words in improv.
that
Yes and.
that's the joke I just made. Yep.
And you just said no, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
No, but. Well,
No,
tell
but
me, what have you been doing for the past 6 months?
not a lot of anything. Getting my garden going in spring. Um, Working on the house. There's been a lot of inner work going on, I suppose. Um, just unfold things unfolding in my inner world, my inner life that just needed time to percolate. I mean, it's still ongoing. It's all still ongoing. It feels very tender and moment by moment. So I've just been resting in that.
Yeah, yeah. I like that moment by moment. That's all there is, really, right?
Oh my god. So
Yeah. So where to go from here?
where to go from here? Do you
Well,
want to
let
share
me.
about why we've been gone? About why we stopped?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think life happens, and we're not doing this for anything other than sheer joy and pleasure of having these conversations with each other and sharing the insights that we have with each other. So
I'm doing it to
sometimes,
eventually. I eventually want to
oh,
be invited onto the Joe Rogan show. That's why I'm doing this.
oh, I didn't know that. Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I wish you the best of luck.
Thanks.
Um, well, I think one of the things that might explain the prolonged hiatus is in January of this year, we both read a book, but I'll speak for myself. I read a book called Effortless Being by David Bingham, and he's a very lovely British man, very unassuming, very sweet, who's turned into a non-dual teacher. I mean, he's just being himself, but really he's had an experience, an awakening, if you can call it, to his true nature, and ended up writing this tiny booklet. It can't be more than 50 pages, if that. It's really quite thin. And I remember reading it while I was on a travel work vacation to Paso Robles, which is a small town in Central Coast, California, just north of San Luis Obispo. My wife was at work, and I was in the hotel room reading this little book, and there was a section in there about integration. And the idea of spiritual integration is when you have an insight or an awakening, you sort of learn to live with it, integrate it into your daily life, into your sense of identity, or more accurately, your lack thereof, the dissolution of identity, and then learn how to live that way. What's the phrase? Before enlightenment, um, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. You just do. I'm sure there's more to it, but like your life is still life. But something really profound happened in that afternoon reading this small book. I was reading this paragraph on integration, and he 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 was saying something about how he was sort of inviting me to listen to a sound and noticing how that sound arises in awareness, and notice how its presence in the space of your awareness is effortless. Like, I didn't need to do anything to make that sound be. And for that matter, I didn't need to do or effort to make any of life be. Life just was. All these objects in the room around me, the light filtering through the window, they just were with no input on my end. And it was this huge insight, a huge sense of like openness and spaciousness that occurred all at once. And I realized I didn't need to do anything. I didn't need to do life. Life just was absolutely effortless. Absolutely effortless. And in that realization was a total quieting of the mind. Just raw stillness for hours. And I sat there in that room watching the sunlight filter through the window, completely quiet. The mind was absolutely dead silent, and there was no one doing anything in that room. In the subsequent months, the intensity of the experience has faded, but the presence of that realization that life, its very nature, is effortless. That's been sitting with me, and that's been something that I've been learning to integrate in my life. As life has gotten busier, and I've taken on more roles from the directorship of several hospitals and whatnot, I've learned that a lot, if not, I should say, I've learned that all of life can occur effortlessly, and I don't need to be the one to do any of it. And it's taken a huge amount of stress off my shoulders. It really, because I'm not there anymore, and life just seems to happen. Some days it's more obvious than others, but that's been really what's been happening in the last 6 months for me.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, it was, Adam is the one who sent me this book, and I I think he sent it in October or something, and then I didn't look at it. I was like, oh, cool, another book. Adam goes through 10 books a week. Like, oh, great, I'll get to this eventually. And I just decided to sit down and read it end of December, early January, and I had the same, something very similar happened to me, and I remember sending the page to Adam, and then that's Adam's experience that he had reading the same page. And yeah, I think for me something very similar, which I think we language it in different ways, and I think that's natural. And something I do want to maybe eventually get into is the Enneagram, and how the Enneagram kind of seems to mirror the way that that people experience this or relate to this. But yeah, for me, it's just been this integration, or this relaxing into experience, and that there's nothing wrong with any experience. And I think for a long time, when you Adam, you talk about doing things and getting something, like, there's someone acting to get something. And I think that's just my way of wording that, is that every experience is okay, including the experience of feeling like you're falling apart or feeling like nothing's happening. And that's just to not run from that. And so I've been in my own kind of inner process of just realizing that there's nothing wrong with my experience, whatever that experience happens to be. And I found that the more that I relax into my experience and trust my experience, and I'll clarify, not my thoughts about my experience, but the experience itself, which is a very important, a critical distinction, which I think we'll get into. But that trusting the experience allows the experience to move. That like the experience of being human, or whatever you want to call it, moves, and it's just a constant, ever-changing movement, and we don't have to resist it. And I think when we try to do things, when we try to assert our will over our lives, we try to build a dam in experience, and that causes tension. It can only ever cause tension. Um, but to really relax into that, one really needs to work to let go of what one thinks one is, what I think I am. So if I think I'm something and then experience presents me with the opposite, if I say, I'm a loving person, and then experience is anger, there's a disconnect there. And the only way to remove the experience never goes away. So the only way to remove that disconnect is to let go of the sense of I that's loving. Um,
Wow, that was huge what you just shared. Well, I've never, yeah, that's something I don't think we've ever talked about. I really like that idea. In every, let me see if I can summarize it, just because it's kind of doing something for me right now with what you just shared. So in every moment, there's the experience of what is. Now it can be like inner emotions of agitation or anger or sadness or depression, whatever. And then there's a self concept. There's a sense of self in the form of thought saying, I am a peaceful, loving, kind person, or I'm a terrible person and I never get anything right. Whatever that self concept is. And then it meets with the experience, and there's usually some resistance there, some like dissonance, right? And you're saying since the experience can't change because it is what it is, it's the concept of the self that needs to fall away or dissolve or change.
well, I mean, needs
Is
to
that
fall away. Sure, yeah, yeah. If you want to experience any sort of peace in your life, I'd say so. Yeah, yeah. I think that. Yeah, that's how I'd say it. Yeah.
that's wild. I it seems there's been a mantra that's been coming up for me very, very frequently. And it's just two words. Zero resistance.
Mm.
Zero resistance. And I love what you just shared, which is trust. Trust what's happening. Trust the moment. In order for me to have zero resistance, I need to be out of the picture. And just what is allowed to be. Whether it's the inner world of the turmoil or whether it's the outer world of things happening, whatever is allowed to be because there's no one there to say it needs to be otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the zero resistance rings true for me as well. Um, like even now, having this conversation, being recording again, I can feel there's like nervousness coming up. There's like a sense of like vulnerability, and I think me last year would have been like trying to cover it and trying to like put on a presentation. See, right now I just know better now to like not resist that feeling, and not because, and this is, I think this is really, to me, this is a key. uh, Not because of any reason, not because it's going to be better if I trust it, or not if I don't resist, not because of some future thing that's going to happen if I do something a certain way, but just to trust it. Just, I guess, just because.
It's not a means
Um,
to an end, is what you're saying.
yeah, it's not a means to an end. It's the, I guess you could say, the, yeah, yeah. I don't know how else to put it.
One thing that you've shared several times since that January experience, and for the record, Stephen and I had very similar. Maybe we talk about it in different ways and use different words, but in January, reading that book, we both had pretty profound insight into the nature of ourself and the nature of presence and awareness. Um, since then, that we've both been integrating quite a bit, and I think the fact that it both occurred to us at the same time, more or less, is kind of hilarious and funny in its own way. Maybe synchronistic is a better word. But something since then that you've shared several times is how much more raw life feels
Oh
because
yeah.
there's no filter saying there's no filter interpreting the emotions that come up, and so there's just the pure intensity of the emotion. Nothing's being suppressed, nothing's being repressed. In fact, I think that's a huge realization how much we tend to suppress the intensity of our own emotions unconsciously. But when there's
Yeah.
no self anymore doing the suppression, what arises in the moment can be very intense, and but if it's allowed to be felt fully, life becomes crazy rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I I completely agree. Um, I think one of the big fears that I've experienced around that, and I'm sure many other people have, is that if you stop resisting, then everything's just going to fall apart. Like there's a certain necessity to the
Um,
tension of life, um, and my experience has shown me the opposite, I suppose. I think at a certain point you just can't resist anymore. Like resisting becomes so painful that the only way through is to allow, basically. But you know, when we have this like story of ourselves and the story of what we're doing in our life and why we're doing it, and all of that is just to resist. The whole purpose of that is resistance. And when you stop resisting, I think a lot of that can feel like it's going to come crumbling down. That all of the effort that we've put in, all of the reasons why things are the we've said that things are the way they are and that why we've done certain things just all comes crumbling down. And I think maybe for some people that's true, that there are truly things that they're up to that are completely out of some sort of alignment with what is, and maybe those things do. But you're especially a great example. I work at a publishing company, and my job is not saving lives and not doing incredibly complex tasks that must be executed a certain way, and let alone being a director of departments and hospitals. And if anyone's life could have come crumbling around them in a dramatic way with lots of ill effects, it would be yours. But I've heard you say so many times that one of the things you've stressed is that you don't have to make those decisions for yourself anymore. If I could put it that way, like you don't have to go out and achieve and accomplish things. And you've shared with me that in meetings, like the right answer just comes, and there's no sort of like sense of like, oh, let me have thought this out for 6 hours ahead of time to get the right answer.
yeah, yeah. Let me give you an example. This has been a really big change for me. Um, so using the Enneagram as an example, I'm number three apparently, which means an achiever. And obviously there's a lot of there's a dark side to that and whatnot. But I think generally in the past it came from I want to do more because the roles that I have and the things that I do in the world give me a sense of value and worth. Obviously that doesn't drive me anymore. There's no desire to do or to be anymore. That sort of desire has faded. Instead, what I noticed that action arises spontaneously in the moment, and the moment itself calls for the appropriate action without my input. I'll give an example. I was talking to one of the ICU nursing directors who was telling me that typically when we round on patients, meaning when we go to each patient's room in the ICU, we have a pharmacist who joins us, and the pharmacist helps us make sure that the correct dosage of the medication is being delivered, that the patient doesn't have allergies to the medication. They suggest alternatives. We really value them being present with us. But the timing of when we round didn't match with their calendar schedule. And so there was a lot of tension. And I remember that this nurse director was telling me the struggle. As she was talking to me, I'm in this place of witnessing and watching, sort of like empty presence. A thought arose: go right now and talk to the pharmacy director. Tell her what the concern is. And then I found myself talking and saying out loud, you know what? Let me just go down to the pharmacy director. Now I'm new to this hospital. I'm new as a director. So I asked someone, like, tell me, where is it? Where's the pharmacy headquarters or whatever? And then so they take me there. I sit down. The pharmacy director says, oh, it's nice to meet you. I heard you're taking over as director. Let me bring the other members of my team so they can all meet you. So she brought her chief of operations, she brought her lead pharmacist, she brought her secretary, whatever. Like a bunch of people all came into her office, and it was 5 of us. And it turns out all these people were the core members of knowing how pharmacy operates. And I shared with them, hey, I was told that there's a challenge getting you to be present with us during our rounds. What's the challenge? And she says, well, that time doesn't work for us, but if we could do it half an hour earlier, we could join. And I said, that's easy for us to fix. We can just round half an hour earlier. And she said, oh, we were told that you can't change things and you have to do it at a certain time. And I was like, no, we just round because it was, it was convenient for us, but half an hour earlier is easy. And she said, that would be great. And I said, okay, I'll tell everyone to round at this time tomorrow. How about tomorrow you send over one of your pharmacists? She's like, no problem. Actually, the person sitting right next to you can join you tomorrow. I said, great. And I shook their hands. We went upstairs, and the next day we rounded at that time. And since then, the pharmacist has been with us for all the rounds. And in that moment, I realized the thought of what to do and what to say will come. I don't need to plan anything. And it has been this way ever since. The right action arises spontaneously in the moment based on what the moment calls for. It's all effortless.
I hadn't heard that example. That's really cool. Yeah, which I think gets us where I go from there is really thinking about the mind, and talking about the mind, and up until a certain point, the mind is all that's available, or it seems like the mind is all that's available. That's really what we identify as. And there comes a certain point when something changes and we realize that we're not the mind at all. That like we're truly not the mind is just a thing that's happening.
Yeah.
Like sound, thought. And when I say thought, I mean like conceptions of conceptualizations. Like if you listen to a sound with no mind, without interpreting what it is, it still happens. You don't need the mind to tell you what it is. It's happening, or to make it happen, for lack of like you shared earlier. And when you realize that you're not the mind, and then you start watching what the mind does. The mind is trying to, like, the mind itself is a tool, and you can be like, okay, for me, I have an old truck. How do I tune the carburetor? The mind is good at figuring that out. I can research things. I can ask ChatGPT. I can go to YouTube. I can watch it. I can do all these things. But when none of that's going on, when there's no problem to solve, the mind is still a tool habitually trying to solve problems that don't exist. But the mind will also convince you that there is a problem to solve, which is like exactly what you're talking about. Where like, oh my God, there's this big thing with the pharmacist. I don't know. Are they going to like me? Are they going to? I'm new here.
Yeah.
Are they going to respect that I'm new? That I'm the director? Do I have to have seniority? Like, is there a reason why they didn't? They said they couldn't before. Do I have to know that? Do I have to know all the history of like this whole relationship, and then like somehow like guide myself into it at the perfect timing and strategy to like make it occur like a stroke of a clock? And it's like, no,
you're so good.
Like it's like that whole thing is made up, and it has nothing to do with the situation, and it's so habitual that we can't help but do it.
Like, you're so good at pretending to be an ego. You're so good.
We can't help but do it. And Yeah, and then you this start seeing that, oh, that's not the case, and then all that's left is this I guess freedom, peace. I don't know. Like it's just what you're saying. It's like things happen, and there's no like you just
Yeah.
trust, and then you start trusting it, right? Because then
Trust.
you see that like, oh, my world didn't fall apart, and actually things are better when I don't mess with them. When I don't
Yes.
go out of my way to mess with them. Yeah, there's a rawness, there's an intensity, there can be strong emotions, there can be, kind of old concepts that break down, and we realize we don't need them anymore. But what's left over after that clearing is just this trust, this joyous trust, that what's happening is great, and what's happening is
Yeah.
okay, and we don't need to have it figured out ahead of time. We have to. There's no effort we have to put in ahead of time,
Yeah.
and in fact, to
Yeah.
do so would just be wasting energy. Um,
There's a feeling I remember very distinctly. My tendency in the past has been to worry. I lean towards anxiety as sort of a default mechanism. At least, the ego does. And if I could bring words to that anxiety, it would be I need to be on guard. I need to watch out for everything in case things fall apart. I got to watch for this. I got to watch for that. I got to think of all possible scenarios for how I can address a situation if this so and so says this to me. If so and so says this to me, this is how I'm going to respond. And I have like, layers and layers of fantasies going on in my mind around what I would do and say in this particular situation at work or at home. None of that is happening, but my mind has to plan for it because it feels if I don't have a plan for life, life's going to fall apart. The shoe will drop. And one thing I've noticed is all of that noise is gone. The vast majority of that has gone. There's no need for it. And so there's now a trust. If I if there's just a resting in the pure naked awareness of this present moment without judgment of the thoughts that arise, without judgment of the emotions that arise or the events that occur, there's so much more stillness. There's so much more stillness. And when an event occurs that requires an action on the part of this body and this mind, the thought of what to do comes spontaneously. And I don't know if you've had this experience. It doesn't feel like I'm choosing the thoughts that arise. Thoughts just come up. And it becomes clear what needs to happen. And I think part of the trust is I don't need to be the one orchestrating my whole life anymore. I can sit back and watch the play unfold. I'm still taking action, obviously. I mean, I have these roles that I'm playing, but it feels like the roles are playing themselves,
mhm.
and I'm watching the play unfold.
Yeah, yeah. I completely agree, and what I've noticed over time, you know, yeah, what I've noticed over time is that there's much more peace with whatever's going on and whatever needs to be done. A lot of times in the past, I would really resist doing certain types of work around the house, like around the yard, the garden, the truck, like whatever I'm. There's so much owning land and a home, and it's just it can feel like a lot, but I've noticed that there's so little resistance to what needs to get done, and I actually find myself just loving whatever needs to be done. Like but I can't tell you how many times that I would stop work and then not want to do anything the rest of the night. I would just be exhausted. I would just like, yeah, I would just not want to do anything. I mean, my wife can tell you this. This is years and years and years of my life, and I've noticed now that like more and more, and it's always. I've actually been surprised that it keeps improving this way. Like I just love doing whatever needs to be done. And last night after work I worked on like 3 or 4 different projects, and I stopped because the sun went down. And it was like, oh, this is a good time to stop. And it was the whole time. There was no like, oh God, I can't wait to take a break. I can't wait to stop. It was just like, oh, let me go do this. Let me go do this. I want to do this. I want to do this. There was just this like engagement with life, and all the little things that are exactly show up because that's what my life is. And I don't need to have the answer ahead of time. I don't need to will myself to get something done that has to be done, and I'm doing it out of a sort of resistance. I find that I genuinely want to do those things. It's been surreal to watch happen, because it's not someone that I would have recognized a year ago or something like that, or 8 months ago, 6 months ago, not six, a year ago. Let's say a year ago.
This is like the anti-hustle culture.
Yeah. That's a great way to put it. Anti-hustle culture.
What you're describing sounds a lot like the way Taoists might describe the Tao. Life becomes a flow. What needs to happen happens. You need to take care of your truck now. You need to work on the garden here. And there's also what I also notice in what you were describing. There's a unity or a harmony with nature. The sun goes down. It feels like a natural time to stop doing what you're doing. You're listening to yourself. You're trusting the feel of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Do you take siestas?
Definitely.
Do you take a little afternoon nap?
Yeah, oftentimes I do. Some weeks, some days I need more than others. But yeah, I've definitely found myself needing siestas and taking them. I find 25-minute naps are incredible. There's like the first like 10 minutes, I'm like, my mind's still going, and I'm like not really feeling any. I was like, wow, I don't know if anything's gonna happen. And like the last 15 minutes, I just pass out. And I've noticed that it's like it's really great. And I wake up and I kind of feel a little bit groggy for 20 minutes, but then I have a lot more energy. And it's just been like watching that happen. I don't know, like I'm so much more. I'd say I'm observing things so much more clearly. I would have never been able to put language to the anatomy of a 25-minute nap a year ago. Who would have cared? Who cares? Like, what do you mean a 25-minute nap? I get in and get out. And now it's like I can tell you how long everything lasts. I can tell you all about the anatomy of that 25-minute nap and why it's so great.
Now that's a good book title, The Anatomy of a Nap.
The anatomy of a 25-minute
nap. Yeah, or an essay title. I find that my wife and I have been napping more on our days off. It's such a glorious feeling to have warm sunlight coming through in the middle of the day. Things are quiet. It's a little warm. You're on the couch, and you just doze off, and it's just like it's such a sweet feeling. If you look at interestingly, the Spaniards do this, or it's a big part of their culture, to just shut down the stores, go in and take a little nap in the afternoon. If you look at the physiology of it, we have a cortisol spike in the morning that naturally comes down in the afternoon, and then we have a evening cortisol spike. So we actually have two spikes of cortisol, which fit perfectly the idea of napping in the middle of the day and sleeping at night. I don't think the idea of pushing really, really hard all throughout the day and then crashing at night is the healthiest way to live life. I think the more you start to learn to be in harmony with the ebbs and flow of physiology and of nature, life seems to happen a little bit more smoothly.
Yeah, I mean, and we can bring that back to the resistance concept we were talking about earlier. I mean, if you're just really feeling what there is or noticing what there is, the body's tired. The body just wants to take a nap. and
Yeah.
then you don't resist it, and you're like, okay, and
Yeah.
then that sense of what's happening, and as opposed to being like, oh God, I'm tired, I have to push through, I need another 3 cups of coffee so I can finish off this afternoon. It's like,
Yeah.
why are you causing yourself so much pain?
Yeah.
Like, for what?
Yeah.
Like for what? What? I don't know. It's just, it seems insane now to say that.
Well, a lot of suffering comes from the thoughts superimposed on an external experience. I think you mentioned this once. You hurt yourself somehow and you felt pain, but
Oh
instead
yeah,
of having like the thoughts of, "Oh my gosh, this is so painful," none of those thoughts occurred, and so you felt pleasure instead, or something
yeah,
like that,
absolutely.
right?
I've had a lot of experiences with pain. I've had moments where, like I hit myself like with a hammer, or I stub my toe, and I immediately catch the thought of like, oh fuck, that hurts, or like some sort of fear about the future, and instead I just come right to it, and either I say pleasure sometimes, or also just I would just use the word intensity. Like experience becomes heightened and intense. Like the chemicals in your body are rushing. There are endorphins, or not even
Adrenaline.
endorphins, adrenaline. Thank you. And there's a but there's no story behind it, and so you just have this like moment of intensity or pleasure, um, and then it's done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So cool. That's so cool. I mean, that's a game changer. I've heard it said that for people who have chronic pain, like chronic regional pain syndrome, um, CRPS, that a sizable portion, a huge percentage of the actual subjective experience of pain is the mental or psychological fear
Yeah.
around the pain getting worse or the suffering of the pain, but the actual uh, physiological pain is a maybe a smaller portion of it, and so
Yeah.
that's why a lot of things like mindfulness and presence training, meditation can appear to lessen the pain of people with chronic pain.
I mean, everything that we're talking about in terms of what causes suffering or what causes tension is comparison. If you're in pain, you're comparing the moment that you're in pain to a moment when you weren't in pain and to a moment when you hope to not be in pain in the future. If you're talking about like a meeting, you're thinking about the past, you're thinking about the future, like you're comparing what is to what you think should be or was. And that is, I mean, that's the source of like almost all human suffering. I'm is comparison in some way, taking saying what is now should was different, and I wish it would be that way again in the future. Um, it's that's it. That's pain. That's planning our lives and these great mental symphonies that we think are going to make everything work out great, and it's all comparison. We're just
Yeah.
constantly comparing ourselves or whatever this moment is to another moment that only exists in our head.
Yeah. Yeah. Judging what is and telling yourself, this is how I'm interpreting what you're saying. Judging what is, what arises, what occurs, both internally in terms of your emotions as well as the events that happen. Um, Judging it and saying it should be other than what it is causes so much suffering. And I still notice those thoughts they do arise far less than they did in the past, but I can watch when the thought of this, what's happening right now, shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And I notice that it creates a cascade of emotions. And then like a sense of like this insatiable like desire. I was gonna say hunger, but like it's more like a desire to change it. It has to change. It has to be something different. And just that in itself, the desire to change what is because it's not supposed to be this way, is immensely painful. It's but we don't identify it as suffering. We think this is what life is.
Yeah.
Life isn't supposed to be this way. I gotta change it. I have to plan for it to be differently. We don't recognize that is suffering.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's really easy to see that with I mean, you have so much experience with this, obviously, with your work and going through people who are dying, or and like there's a moment that's it. Like with my brother, like he was alive and then he was dead. There's no like, let me bring him back from the dead so that I don't have to experience this. Um, it's like, how can I come to terms with the fact that he died? How can I, like that? I can run for years. I mean, I'm sure if you're listening to this, or probably know someone who, or maybe it's you, who's someone so close to you passed away, and how much, or an animal or something, and how much you wish that you could just bring them back and not have to have gone through that. And that whole time spent running, like, you still have to deal with the emotion if you ever want to actually heal that. You can create so much buried suffering by running from what is. And I'm using a strong example, but this is the exact mechanism that plays out in any time you compare anything. Is there's something should be different than what is, and we create entire worlds and universes out of these very clever ways to avoid feeling what is, because what is oftentimes is very intense.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like someone dying, or
yeah.
it doesn't even have to be. It's the same feeling. It doesn't have to be someone dying. It can be like, I don't want to go to work today. Like, it's the exact same comparison.
Yeah.
It's literally the exact same thing. We say they're different, but they're not at all. One is just
Yeah.
stronger than the other, but
This
only in
is
degrees. They're the same situation.
There's a great phrase that I like. I tell myself often, there's no hierarchy of illusions,
Yeah.
which I really like. An illusion of resisting what is and telling yourself that it should be, it can be very intense or it can be very, very mild, but recognizing that um, in essence, they're the same. I want to share with you a story. Um, when when I was in a hospital, very recently, I was working at a hospital in close to downtown LA, and it's a little rough there. There was a woman who was about to die, and she had her son, and she had several children. But her son was clearly a gang member. I mean, he was tattooed from the hairline down to his toes, um, and kind of spoke in a way. He had a bunch of friends that would come and visit with him that seemed like they were all gang members. He was very, very hard, and he was like, give it to me straight, doc. Is she gonna die? Is she gonna die? And I was like, yeah, I can't predict the future, but she's very, very ill. She's critically ill. She has multi-organ failure, and I'm worried that she's not gonna be able to make it. And he's like, a miracle can happen. A miracle can happen. It's all right. I'll pray for her, but like very stoic. And then the nurse called me like an hour later. The family was in the waiting room, and she told me that the patient's heart stopped. And the patient was very adamant. She said, "Do not resuscitate me if my heart stops." She made it clear. So her heart stopped. She died. I went to tell the family and the son, and I said, her heart just stopped. I don't know why or what happened, but it just stopped. He screamed. He was like, no. And he started cursing, mother effer, this and that, and then he like ran to the room and he went to her and he grabbed her hand and he's like, Mama, you gotta come back. Don't do this to me. You gotta come back. And he started like pounding her chest, and the nurse was like, just please, don't do that. Do that. And he like the whole family was around her. It was painful to watch. For the next hour, I kid you not, for the next hour, he was screaming at her, the patient, come back, you can do this. And then he would get really serious. He's like, you're a fighter, Mom. You're a fighter. I know that you can do this. You're a fighter. Come on, go for it, go for it, go for it. Come back, come back, come back. He could not see that her body was going into rigor mortis. Her face, all the blood was coming out of it. She had these like lifeless eyes staring out into the ceiling. She was dead, and she had been dead for a while now. And he was like pleading with her to come back. And I remember sitting there watching, and the family too. The daughters clearly accepted that she had gone, and they were rubbing his back. He could not accept that she had died. He was shouting to her as if she had some say and she could come back. It was so striking. And he, at one point, he just got up and walked out and never came back. He just left the hospital, walked away. And it was, to me, this is sort of an extreme version of what we do on a daily basis. We
Oh, we do it moment by moment.
we shout at the universe saying, "Don't be what you are,"
Yeah.
and expect things to change.
And
But all
it's
it
the
does is
same it's
cause
the same
suffering.
feeling. Like if I feel into that right now, like anything, like it's the same grief. Um
Yeah,
that in that moment it's the exact same grief with anything in our lives that we just wish it could be different. Um yeah.
yeah,
And it can't.
yeah. You can't. Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
so. But think about how much of life and is predicated on the belief that you can change what is.
Yeah.
All the self help, all the you know manifestation work, all the efforting around create the life of your dreams is predicated on changing what is. And now I should say, like, obviously you can plan for your life. I have health insurance, right? I have life insurance. I'm planning for life. I'm taking action, but I think it's something more raw, more fundamental.
Yeah.
The inability to be with what is.
Yeah.
I hadn't labeled it as grief, but I like the way that you did that. Yeah, yeah. It's sort of the struggle, the pain, the suffering of the inability to accept what is, and just to be present with what is, with no judgment.
Yeah. Yeah, if I were to go, I know I shared this with you a while ago, but there was this moment when I felt like I was so emotional and angry, and I was just exploring it. I was just being with it, and it felt like I had lifted the lid on like some cauldron of anger, like primordial ego anger, and I was just like looking at it. I was like, "What is going on?" Like, and I just so much of that grief is for me like the mind, or ego, whatever you want to call it, however you break it down, it wants to find solidity so bad.
Yeah,
Like our minds, our egos, it wants to be whole
yeah,
so bad. And it doesn't get that it can't. That its job isn't to be whole. Its job is to be broken so that we search for wholeness. But it's the thing that we think we are.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so it's always looking to be whole, to heal this hole that can never be filled.
It will
And
search forever.
it'll do anything it can to create the whole universe, this whole worlds inside of us
Yeah,
to to find that, but it never can. And it's this that's why I say it's the same grief, because it's the same grief. It's just to different degrees. That's why I called it grief.
yeah,
Because it's the same belief and yearning to be whole.
yeah,
But I think one of the things that I've seen is that as I've watched this mechanism work is that it just can't be. It's not its job.
yeah.
Its job is to solve problems,
Yep.
and in order for it to solve problems, it has to think there's a problem.
That's it.
Otherwise, it wouldn't try to solve it. And so it's like
Exactly.
this fundamental built-in flaw. But it's when we use it to in the like a moment like where someone passes away or the my day isn't going the way want my day to go, it it applies the same tool set as like trying to wake up on the spiritual path, right? Because it's such a dichotomy that the ego is ultimately the one that wakes you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
This thing that thing that can't be whole, can never be whole, will always be have a piece that feels like it's missing, is the actual thing that pushes us all to find wholeness in the first place.
Yeah.
And so it's like yeah, it's just we just have to listen to it. Like we just have to listen to what is it telling us, what does it think that's wrong with right now, and then go into whatever we think is wrong with right now, whatever we're comparing, just go into that and just see what's there.
Yeah. Yeah. I've heard it worded differently. The obstacle is the path,
Yeah,
or the
yeah,
using a
absolutely.
thorn to remove a thorn,
Yeah,
right? Using an illusion to come out of illusions.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. It's a very clear from obviously from what you're experiencing right now, and what you're sharing, the depth of the suffering that arises with that searching, that endless searching, seeking and seeking, hoping, but not ever finding.
yeah, yeah. Absolutely. I mean, that's certainly my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, mine as well too. Yeah, this is why it's the power of non-duality in a sense, which is the recognition that there never has been separation, as opposed to feeling something terrible happened and we need a path to fix it. We need a plan to solve it.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I mean, when you take away that, when you just step away from that feeling, what's left is just it's whole. I mean, it's not whole as in the feeling of wholeness. It's whole in that it's not divided. The
Yeah.
mind is the thing that divides it, but the mind is an option. Like if you just
Yeah.
you can, I mean, I was saying before, you can listen to a sound, whatever sense is like the sense that you relate to the most. And for certain people, it's sound, sight, smell, touch, doesn't matter. Like just pay attention to something occurring in that sense field and do not label it. Just listen without labeling. Like that has not been divided. We divide it when we label it. And if you even look at the etymology of the word, this blew my mind. Okay, so there's all these levels to like the way that awakening is like baked into our world, and all the kind of like these fun jokes. If you look at the word define, right? I'm saying don't define that sound. The word define, the etymology is definir, which is to limit.
Wow.
What is it limiting? Right? The whole idea of definition, defining something, is to limit that thing.
Oh my gosh. I didn't think about it. I've never looked into the etymology of that
Yeah,
word.
but
That's
it's
wild.
right there. It's right there. So when you listen to something, you touch something without putting a concept onto it, it's whole. And the mind is what separates it.
Huge realization. Thank you, sir. Wow. I think yeah, we covered so much today, and a really impactful return
I think we're good for another
to
6 months.
recording. Yeah. I'm not sure. We got a lovely
Oh
message
yeah,
and
yeah, we
mail
did.
from what was her name? A shout
Oh,
out to
you
we'll
better
find out
say it
what her
now
name
that
is.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
find out
yeah.
now that you've brought it
We
up in the middle of
first
this
of all, we
live.
love getting messages from you all. It really makes this personal. It makes us feel like we're speaking to someone. So please, if there's a part of you that feels, oh, I should just let them know that I'm enjoying this, or I want to talk about a particular teacher or topic, please, you can reach out to us on Buzzsprout directly. You can send us an email. I'm sure we've mentioned that probably in the show notes. There's going to be our email address. Whatever way you find to email us and let us know. Your
Yeah, it was
appreciation, we
Leanne, by the
appreciate it.
way. Leanne, this one's for you.
This one's for you, Leanne. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Actually, your message prompted us to say, you know what, we got to come back. Let's come back because we've been so in this place of integration and you know being with the insights and the realizations that have occurred to us in the past couple months. There was no real drive to record again, but clearly there's a lot of power that just came out in this recording. So thank you, Leanne. Thank you. Any last words, Stephen?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay, well, lots of love to all of you listeners out there, and Steve and I will be coming back for more, for
All
sure.
right, bye, Adam. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Stephen. Bye.